We're here with Kurt Kelly, who is running for Congress in District 8 in the Republican primary. I wanted to ask you about, you've made some comments about Alan Grayson, who may or may not be your opponent after the primary. But you told in a Fox News interview, you said that District 8 had been hijacked by Alan Grayson. I wasn't sure what you meant by that because, I mean, he was duly and legally elected to this office. So what do you mean that he has hijacked District 8?
Good. I'm glad you asked that because he came in and represented himself to be somewhat of a moderate. He was going to be this person that was going to make sure he protected our military and not getting bad armor and all of that stuff. He ran as this sort of a middle center type of person in the campaign. I know. I watched it very carefully. I'm a student of politics, and I paid attention to that race. He is anything but that. He misrepresented himself, mischaracterized himself. He is probably one of the most extreme liberals we have in Congress. He absolutely far to the left of Obama on most of the issues out there that I hear him articulate. And so this is a center-right district by all accounts. It is the district that has been represented by Lou Fry. It's been the district that has been represented by Bill McCullum. It is the district that was represented by Republicans Rick Keller for years. And for Alan Grayson to come in and to try to represent himself as this moderate, he's anything but moderate. Listen, I don't have a problem with a person standing up and saying, I'm a staunch liberal. Fine. Then we expect that. You know, Barack Obama made no bones about it when he ran that he had a very, very liberal agenda. And I don't think anybody should be surprised when he comes in and implements that. There's at least a level of fairness. That was not Alan Grayson. And so the word hijack, I stand by it. He absolutely came in and misrepresented himself and presented himself to be something that he is not.
You've signed a pledge not to increase taxes as a congressman. And I'm curious about that because, during World War II, the tax rates were increased dramatically, basically so the United States could fight a world war. And I'm curious about why people would sign a tax pledge like that would, if they were to stick to their pledge, tie their hands possibly in time of a national emergency.
Because I believe that at the time of World War II, when that was coming in place, the taxes were at a very low level at the time. Is what it was supposed to be. It started as the income tax started at 1 to 2%, and it moved up incrementally there. Then it jumped up. We're not at that point anymore. Listen, the more money that we take out of individuals' pockets, the more money we take it to throw it into the black hole of government and spending in government without having the accountability in government, the more that we continue to do that, the more that we destroy the very economy that we find to be so valuable, that we've all built our lives on. The free market economy does work, guys. And the more that government gains into this, and the more that government takes the money away from individuals. I didn't just do that for...
The question was in the context of a national emergency or a wartime. And so it's not a question of whether or not the free market works. I would never dispute that. I'm just asking about why people would sign a pledge like this that might back themselves into a corner during an emergency.
Because I think we're in such dire times at this point in time. We're in such dire times at this point in time that if we do not make a stand that we are taxed enough, that we have too much money coming out there, because government has not gotten under control. I think it absolutely puts us in the right place to say that you got to get the expense of government under control. And if we do not do that, then we are going to have the European issue that we saw in Greece. America's moving down that path. And so I think our citizens have said, we've had enough of this. I've had enough of this. What I want us to do, I think reasonable, thoughtful people know that we must limit the size of government and cut government and cut government spending. Now, in times of national emergency, if we have the borrowing power, our founding fathers understood you would borrow the money and then pay that off in a generation. Look what we're doing. We're borrowing the money with no intentions of paying this off. And then the first thing you want to say is, well, if a national emergency comes along, we have no more borrowing power, so we'll just tax you. That's irresponsible. And that's exactly where we are today. And so no, I happily signed that pledge because I know that it forces us to make those tough decisions over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And we're going to have to come in and actually cut the size of the federal government dramatically.
Would you abide by the other half of pay-as-you-go, which says that if you cut a tax, you need to make up for the revenue that would be lost somehow through a spending cut or through a tax increase of another area?
In a spending cut, I wouldn't cut one area just to tax another area. Let's also consider this, guys, and I know there's a lot of arguments about how we're going to fund the federal government. I think we're in a convoluted and fallacious process right now of the graduated income tax and the way it works. I do believe there is much movement for people to begin to look at different types of tax processes, whether it's the fair tax, which has been talked about across all circles, or and by the way, I recognize the fair tax. I've read the material on fair tax, and there's, frankly, from an American perspective, forget the party perspective, probably the fairest thing we can do is to allow everyone to engage the process at some level. Put the smallest possible tax across the board on everyone, and so that everyone can play. And I understand it's a consumptive tax, and it has some issues in that area. And I think there are some ways to deal with some of the regression issues to that. But put that aside, I think we're going to have to look at that, a much more simplistic tax code and a much more a fairer process that engages everyone in the process. You know, one of the greatest lessons I see of watching children when they first get their job is to watch their paycheck when they think they're making $8 an hour, $9 an hour, and all of a sudden they see this stuff coming out. And it's an interesting thing to see them. One of the greatest civics lessons takes place right then. And I think that all of a sudden I watch them wanting to engage in the process. Now, maybe it's out of selfish motives initially, but I believe we become greater citizens when we all pay for this process fairly across the board. I think the fair tax has that greatest strength. But there's a flat tax that's looked out at there. There's the Reagan tax cuts and some of those things that people have talked about. So I think the revisiting of the entire tax code is important.
But you don't sound like you're advocating any of those. You sound like you're saying, let's look at them.
If I'm advocating one, I'm advocating the fair tax. But I am prepared to say that I'm not 100% ready to stamp it because I think there are some areas that we have to take a look at it. But I would say in the fairness thing, I like the fair tax.
Do you believe the president is a Marxist?
No, I don't know about Marxist. I think that's tough terminology. I believe that he is.
It's not mine.
Okay, well, it's not mine. I believe he's a socialist. Or let me say this. I believe he has extremely socialistic leanings. He made it somewhat clear in his running for office that he believed that really government is the solution. That the idea of more government paying for it, providing greater services for everyone, that government is the solution, that is a socialist concept. And so I believe I know he bristles at that, but frankly, the evidence of where he's headed is right down that path. I want to take you to a point you made earlier. You said the Republicans sometimes do this. Yeah, actually, we've had all-out charge towards socialism, and we've had incremental socialism. And I think that maybe this has been a real wake-up for America that we cannot go down this path. We cannot sustain this.
Your website is critical of the stimulus plan that was passed in the first few months of the president's term, and yet the stimulus plan is really what made your job as a legislator these last couple of years easier than it would have been. Would you agree with that? And how do you criticize the stimulus if in fact it bailed out the state of Florida?
Well, I'm sorry to say that we were paying it with money we didn't have.
Well, I understand that.
Okay,
but you still used it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if they're going to put it down to Florida, I mean, there is a responsibility to say, and I've said this publicly, I said it in a committee hearing meeting. As an American, I hate the stimulus dollars. As a Floridian, you're going to put it down here, we will utilize it judiciously. And we did. We didn't take all of the stimulus dollars, by the way. There were some things that we actually said we didn't want because it had too many strings attached. Let me say this. I think you're right. It probably did make us Some of the decisions not as painful for specifically for public education, because those were some of the dollars that were mostly the dollars were utilized. But frankly, we still would have. We're going to have to make. I'm not going to be back there. We're going to have to make those same decisions this coming year. And quite frankly, I am still critical. Why? Because you do not pay out dollars that you do not have.
We're out of time. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you.